Okay, you're able to see my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Now, first theoretically we'll see, and then we'll go for practical things. Okay. So, whenever we are working with Spring, whenever we are working with Spring, yeah. Now, so whenever we are working with Spring, so I said like there are some lot of compatibility issues if you are working if you are using of one version Java version or any other database versions, then compulsory it should match with other versions also. There may be some chance. Okay, we need to search for all the compatible libraries whenever we are working with Spring application. Okay, Spring Core or Spring web application, anything that is our developer responsibility to check the right versions whichever that is required for our project. That is our responsibility in case of Spring application. Okay, and so along with that, so we will configure our data source, JDBC template, Hibernate template, and dispatcher servlet, view resolver, or correct or not. In case of Spring application, we are add all these things, correct, right? So in the XML file or in the auto app configuration file, compulsory we need to add data source one. Okay, or else if you are going, if you go to one in application, let me Spring Boot. Okay, let's go here. Whenever we are working with Spring, okay, whenever we are working with Spring, we need to sorry, we need to search for all the compatible libraries and the everything which is required for our application, right? Let's say for example I'm working with JDBC template, correct or not? So in that case what all things is required? I'm working with Spring, right? Spring Core is required, Spring Contest is required, right or not? And Spring JDBC is required. Okay, this is a proprietary jar, don't worry. Okay, this is our own jar. So but the rest of other things is compulsory. If any one thing is not there, will it work application? No, right, guys? So in the Spring application, all these dependencies in the palm file compulsory we need to add, right or not? Right? If any one dependency is also missing, then let's say for example, if I'm commented this one, okay, now let's see, will it any errors is coming like on the Spring context? Let's comment it. Oh, right click. See, there is some errors is coming, right? What is the errors? There is some annotations, right? Right or not? Compulsory, we need to search for all these libraries, correct or not? At configuration is giving. If any one thing is also missing, it will not work out, correct or not? So all compatible libraries we need to search it. Okay, and but in case of Spring Boot, if you want to work with Spring JDBC, okay, if you want to work with JDBC, then only one dependency is enough to download all its related down libraries. Let's say add both. Okay, now let's see here how many libraries these are. There are some 5 to 10 8 to 10 libraries is there, right? So to work with JDBC, but if you go with Spring Boot, so we don't need to search for all this. If you are adding one dependency, if you are adding single dependency, then whichever it is related with other dependencies, all that will be downloaded by Spring Boot itself with no compatibility. If you are specifying Spring Boot version itself, then compatible, all compatible to that Spring Boot version, it will download it. We don't need to search for yes, this version is required in this case, this version is required if you are using of this version. We don't need to Search for, have any tension for that. Okay. The how means, let's say, let me create a Spring Boot application. Okay, first we'll read it. Okay, next we'll go for practical also, guys. Someone can. Okay. Now, after that, the data source. In case of Spring, what we have done, so we have added the data source, right or not? So the data source is depending on, again, JDBC template, correct or not, right? So, but in case of Spring Boot, we don't need to configure JDBC template. JDBC template is depending on data source. These things we don't need to configure. Spring Boot itself automatically will configure these data sources and JDBC template. How means, whenever it is identifying the JDBC template in the class path, then automatically Spring Boot will auto-write that dependencies based on the jar file is available in the class path. Second, yeah. Now this is of our Spring application with JDBC template, correct or not? So guys, what is the most important in case of Spring configuration or not? So anyone can write the controller, service and DAO. Okay, guys, anyone can write off controller, service and DAO, but the main pain point is the configuration. Main pain point is configuration to which class is depending on which other class. Okay, all that is main, correct or not, right? We don't know the which class is depending on which class. If JDBC's template is depending on data source, that is one headache. Let's say in case of Hibernate template is depending on session factory, correct or not? Session factory is depending on data source. Like that, those auto that configuration we don't need to take care. The Spring Boot itself automatically taking care of that configuration. If the class is available in the class path. Okay, now let's go and see that some practical things. Okay, now in this case, let's first simply how to write on Spring Boot application. Okay, let's say I'm writing, guys, better to go for Spring Tool Suite. Okay, not Eclipse, better to go for Spring Tool Suite. It is of a one IDE STS. Okay, go for Spring Starter Project. Spring Starter Project. Click on that. Okay, now open. This is the name of the project. Okay, Spring Boot mm, first project. Project. So here we need to configure the it will Spring Boot will support for multiple build, even it will support for Maven, okay, and Gradle. Okay, so it will support for multiple build tools. Okay, we are using of Maven, and it will support of jar and var. Okay, if you want, select jar, and which version of which languages it will support. Java, Kotlin, Groovy, like that. The Spring Boot will support for multiple languages. We need to select of Java, and we need to select versions which we want to using in our application. Select Java 8, and all this will come whenever you are entering the project name. Automatically that will come here. Okay, now click on next. This is the main thing. So like here, whichever dependency you want, whichever the dependency you want, we need to add here. Okay, we don't need to write dependency separately in the POM file. If you are adding here, automatically it will come in the POM file. Let's say if you want to develop a REST controller, simple REST controller, then we need to add up search for web. Simply search for web. Select select Spring Web, and click on next. Go back, and one more is add dev tools. Dev tools. I'll tell you what is the use of dev tools. Go to next. See, internally it is going to use of which Spring Boot version, guys? Here, guys, Spring version is different and Spring Boot version is different. Both are different. Okay, Spring Boot internally it will use of Spring version, but Spring Boot version is different. Spring version is different. Okay, guys, are you able to hear me, right, guys? Both are different. Now, let's see the magic. I have how many dependencies I have added, or else let's leave this. Only one, correct or not? Here, how many dependencies I have added? Only single, right? See, here it is saying new Spring Starter project dependencies. How many I have added? Only one dependency, right or not? Let's go and see how many. Here it will download one zip file and it will extract that zip file into our project. Okay. Now, no need to do automatically the Spring Boot starter. It will do that. We don't need to do that anything. See, automatically. See here, this is the project, correct or not? Let's close it. Close other unwanted projects. Now go to maven file. Go to, sorry, palm file. So how many we have created added, guys? This is default dependency for any Spring Boot application. Spring Boot starter test. Spring Boot starter test. Leave it about that. I'll explain. This is for test cases. JUnit, Mockito. For that, this is the default dependency it will add for any Spring Boot project. Okay, but actually we have added which one? Only this one, web. Correct or not? But if you are adding single dependency, see how many jars it might be downloaded. See, so whichever it is dependent, all the jars will be downloaded by Spring Boot itself. The compatibility also no compatibility because so now go and see. So at the time of this dependency is depending on the parent. This dependency is depending on the parent. There is one more parent. So it is depending on this parent dependency. What is the parent dependency is Spring Boot starter parent. So inside that, what is the version that we are using? 2.7.7. How exactly we can search all these dependencies means, now let's go and Spring Boot starter parent. Just click on that. Click on first link. Okay, it will show like this. Okay, and we are using of which version, guys? 2.7.7. Click on 2.7.7. So inside this, if you want to go and check the Maven repository, then wait and see. We will get one Maven. Click on central. Okay, click on central. It will open the repository. It will open maven repository. Even inside that also, from where exactly it is going to download means, you will click on this url. It will show everything there. Now, so what is the path, guys? Here, now click on what is org, right? Now first org, right? Now click on search for org. Click on org. Okay, now after that, spring framework. Search for spring framework. Inside that again, search for spring boot. Okay, this boot. Search for boot. Go inside that. It will show all the dependencies of spring boot. It will show all the dependencies of spring boot. Now, which dependency we are using, guys? Now it is of Spring Boot Starter Web. Okay, Spring Boot Starter Web. Search for this library web. Spring Boot Starter Web. Click on that. So it is showing off which version we are using. Which version we are using? Go to 2.7.7. Okay, go inside that. So inside this, go to POM file. See, it contains of these are all jars: Spring Boot, Starter, Spring Boot, Starter JSON, Tomcat, Spring Web, Spring Web MVC. All this, whichever it is, depending on again, it will download of all the versions, right or not? So, if I am adding single dependency, all dependencies along with this is also it will download everything. Okay, if you are mentioning one, so web means it is a web application or not, right? Web means it is a web application. Okay, Spring Boot Starter Web means yes, the starter is used for developing any web applications. Then in that case, we need server or not, right? We need server. It is not a core Java application, standalone application. It is a web application. To deploy web application, we need of server, right or not? In case of Spring, we need to deploy our application in some server or not? Spring web application means. But in case of Spring Boot, we no need to search for any, we no need to install any server. Automatically, Spring Boot itself will download Tomcat server by default, and it will start it will deploy the application in Tomcat server. We no need to do anything. Okay, simply boot itself will start and then it will deploy. Now, so it is depending on, let's assume, parent. Now go to parent. Okay, the how exactly that dependent compatible versions are downloading means, that I am going to show you now. Okay, this is Spring Boot Starter Web. It is depending on the parent is, it is depending on the parent is Spring Boot Starter parent. Now go back, go back, parent, parent, Spring Boot Starter parent. Now this is also having all the versions. Now go to 2.7.7. Go to POM file. There are multiple files will be there, guys. So you need to go only POM file. Okay. Now, so this is of Spring Boot starter parent dependency, right? Again, this also having some parent. What is the parent having, guys? There is one parent. What is that? Spring Boot dependencies. There is one more depend. It is depending on one more other parent, right or not? Now we need to search for Spring Boot dependencies. From there, all these are coming. Okay, actual things. Now go back, go back. Search for Spring Boot dependencies. Now you can go on here. From here, all the compatible libraries will be download. Now, do you have any parent for this? No, right? So this is the artifactory. Correct? Spring Boot dependency. See under this. See how many properties. If it is any active MQ, or if you are Spring version, or let's say Spring. See where is the Spring? See which Spring version it is depending, guys. Whenever we are using Spring Boot 2.7.7 version of Spring Boot, internally it will download of which Spring version jar libraries? 5.3.24 Spring version related jars it will download. Clear or not? How exactly? We don't need to search for any compatible. We don't need to search for any compatible versions. Spring Boot itself will take care of. Let's say if you are going for other version. Okay, go for let's say 2.4.5. Okay, go to POM. Now search for Spring. Spring. It is depending on which version, guys. 5.3.6. Before, even I don't also remember that. This is remember one. Maybe around of that only. Maybe compatible libraries. Let's say if you are going for 2.4.5, what is the Hibernate version that it is going to use? Now search for Hibernate. Hibernate. See, it is going to use of some Hibernate versions, all Hibernate entity managers, everything it will. Hibernate version. Hibernate. Yeah. See here, Hibernate version of which version it is using? 5.4.30 final version it is using. Guys, so whenever you are using single Spring Boot dependency, we don't need to search for any other compatible libraries. Spring Boot itself, based on the Spring Boot version, it will download the compatible libraries. Let's say, for example, Tomcat. What is the Tomcat version that it is going to use? If we are using Spring Boot 2.4.5 version, okay, then Tomcat is one version is there, right or not? Let's say internally to deploy our application, we use of one Tomcat version. What is the Tomcat version, guys? I used it here. See, 9.0, right? If we are using 2.4.5, Spring Boot itself internally will take care. It will install 9.4.5. It will deploy our application in 9.0.45 Tomcat version server. Okay. Now let's go and see what is the 2.7.7. 2.7.7. For this Tomcat. Tomcat. So what is the Tomcat version this is using, guys? Before it is 4.5, right? So even every dependency will be upgraded by Spring Boot itself. We don't need to do anything. Okay, just our work is only to run the application. Internally, the dependencies will be compatible dependencies will be downloaded by Spring Boot itself. Okay, that is one advantage, and that is of compatible libraries, guys. And next one is whenever you are using up, yeah, go ahead. That's it exactly. One single dependency. See that here any other dependency I have added only apart from this, only leave it about the test, or else I'll comment this. Okay, there are some joint related, it will download it, or else just comment this also. Now many jars will left out. See, we don't have of any jars, correct or not? Or else let's enable this. Oh, see, Maven dependencies. I have added only test. These are all related to JUnit test cases. It can be used of Makito. It can be used of latest one, Jakarta. It can be used of different libraries which are required for JUnit test cases. All that jars will be downloaded by Spring Boot. Only this is added, right? Now remove this. Remove that. Let's remove this. Now all these jars will gone, right? Now add only this dependency. Okay, Spring Boot starter web, and click on save, control yes. Let's see the Maven dependencies, how many things it will download. See, to whichever jars it is, let's say assume if Spring Tomcat is depending on WebSocket, it will download. If WebSocket is depending on the embedded code, then it also will download. Spring MVC is depending on all this. So if this is depending on any other jars, then all the dependent jars also will be downloaded by Spring Boot itself. Okay, but there are out of all these jars, we may not need of all these jars. Okay, but that is a ignorable work. It doesn't impact of our performance of our application. Okay, sorry, it will download of some extra jar, so it will take up some extra space, but it will not give you any impact for the performance related wise. Okay, then in that case, so the space it doesn't matter, right or not? It is downloading all the related libraries. That is one reducing our headache. Is it enough or not, guys? In the companies, so the space is doesn't matter. It is reducing the lot of developer work. Lot of developer work it is that is the main advantage for them. Space is doesn't matter for them or money. Okay, it is the main thing is saving time. Okay, now next, now we will write off one application, one controller class, any class. This is automatically generated class. This will do all magic. Okay, we no need to write this class. Just our work is only to right click, run as Java application. It is even not to deploy on server. No need to run on server also. Just to right click and run as Java application like a core Java application. Internally Spring Boot itself will take care and it will start the server. Okay, let's go and add one controller class. Let's say class, any class by control. Okay, dot controller. Now head of any one rest controller. Okay, next write one method. Okay, public string or any mm, hello get message, any message, any one method I'm writing. Okay, so this method is what is the return type of this method? We need to write some string. Okay, hello, welcome to Springboot. Okay, now I'm giving some message. Now we need to annotate one annotation. What is the annotation, guys? We need to use of one annotation. Sorry, at the request mapping we are using, right or not? Okay. In case of if it is a get message, right, there is a specialized annotation is there for get. For get, method type is get and post. There are two types is there, right or not? Right. If you want to use of get directly, there is annotation called get mapping. Directly there is annotation called get mapping. Just to give hello. Okay. This is of our, this is of our application. This is our endpoint URL. Okay. Now let's, I will not do anything. Just simply run it. Did I added any server here? No server. This is a main method. Public static void main method, guys. Okay. I am running main method. That's it. Just click on run as Java application. Now you people can go and see Tomcat server is Tomcat started on port, which port? 8080. This is the default Tomcat port, guys. 8080. Okay. Now already our application is deployed in Tomcat server. Okay. But actually my Tomcat server port I have given is 1234, guys. When I am testing REST template, I used of 1234. This is my Tomcat version which I have used, Tomcat port which I have used when I am installing my installation of Tomcat server externally, right? But in Spring Boot, it is displayed on, it is deployed the application in which port? 8080. Okay, now go and check it. Not here, even if you go on, check in the directly here, HTTP localhost host 8080 slash, what is the endpoint, guys? Endpoint of our hello, right? HELLO. Let's enter it. Is it called or not? So I didn't do any configuration. Correct or not? No Spring configuration file. Correct? But still it is directly Xing. Guys, are you able to understood, right? Here, the third advantage is inbuilt server in Spring Boot. The third advantage is so I don't configure of data source. I don't want to configure of JDBC template. Okay. Now we'll see one more example with JDBC. Okay. Now let's see of close this project. Now let's add of one more project. Now this is my Spring project, guys. What I did in case of here, just same, everything is same, guys. I don't want of sorry, I don't want of this configuration file, and I don't want of this getting of all those things. Okay, I will write off calling of these methods. I'll write off calling these methods. Okay, but I don't want to load off this up config file. I will not load this directly. I will use of get bin method internally. Spring Boot itself, it will create of one application context object, but in case of Spring we are created, okay, by loading manually. Now here what is there? DAO, everything I have added. Now go to Spring Boot. So here what is the, this is one application. Okay, this is a no loading, guys. See, this is for calling up that method, but I didn't load any configuration file. No configuration file. Okay, DAO okay, and no, the main thing it will reduce is our work of configuration. Only service, DAO and entity model class is there, and directly and application, but there is no configuration file like this, guys. Are you able to see in the Spring Boot, right? Correct or not? Are you able to see anything here? No, right? There is no config folder, correct? But let's see. And now I have added only single dependency. Which dependency? So this is a JDBC application, right or not? Our JDBC application. Now let's say service class. Service class is calling of DAO, create employee. Okay, the DAO class is depending on which class? Let's go and see. DAO is depending on which class, guys? JDBC template, right? JDBC template internally depending on data source. Correct or not? But that configuration I have not added in Spring Boot application, but in Spring application I have added, right or not? If I am not added the Spring data JDBC template, the Spring configuration cannot identify the dependency. Auto configuration, right? This configuration is compulsory, then only it can auto configure, right or not? But in case of Spring Boot, now I will not do that. Why? Means internally Spring Boot itself, if the JDBC template is available in the class path, if any of the jar file, then automatically Spring Boot itself, it will configure. Yes, employee DAO is depending on JDBC template. Then I need to configure JDBC template dependency inside employee DAO. Okay. Again, JDBC template is depending on data source. For the data source, we need of driver class URL username password. Is it correct or not, guys? Yes. In that case, our work is only need to add up only username, URL, and password. So, like a simple properties. These are fixed Spring Boot properties, guys. If these are available in the properties file, what Spring Boot will do? First, it will load off. First, it will load off this application dot properties file. In case of Spring, in case of Spring, Spring dot hyphen application hyphen context dot XML file. That is the configuration file for Spring, right or not? Or app config file is there. That is the configuration file for Spring. But in case of Spring Boot, the configuration file name is called application.properties file. Everything we will write inside application.properties file. Okay, here in case of Spring Boot, we will not use of any XML. It will avoid of all the XML files, all XML things, dependencies. It will remove inside Spring Boot. Okay, now let's JDBC template we are using. Okay, but I am not configure that in the in the configuration file, but still internally Spring Boot itself will take care of that. Now let's go and run the application. So control cancel. Did I modify anything here? Is it getting from the database or not? See, this is of, see guys, this is of get employee by, or else let me comment this, or else get fetch all employees, fetch all employees. So what it is connecting with the service layer, right? Service layer get all employees implementation. Service layer is depending on, it is calling of DAO, get all employees of DAO. So in here I am calling up select star from employee spring, right or not? And internally it is using of which template? JDBC template to get the data, right? Now run it again if you want. Is it downloaded or not? Getting the data from database. If you want, I need to open Oracle, right? Somewhere Oracle might be. Where is that? Softwares, skill developer, skill developer. We can, but we need to add up some plugins, ma. We need to add up some plugins that will give us some headache for you people also. Instead of that, download STS, download STS software. So I'm using of Spring 4.1.17, I think. So 4.1.17. Yeah, 4.17.1. Okay, I'm using a 4.17.1. So guys, how it will download means, this is bit careful. So normally it is of not it is of giving of some executable jar file. It is just to double click on this, it will extract to some folder. It will like not to deploy, not it will not install. If you double click on this one, what it will do, it will extract all the data of that jar file, and it will open the in this folder. Okay, inside this folder we need to open, then click on this symbol, double click on that. Okay, not like Eclipse, not installation. This is of double click on that, it will extract all the data into one folder. Okay, now go to ORCL. Now what is our table, guys? What is our query? What is the JDBC executing which query? See here, it is executing of which query? Select star from employee string. Right, now let's is giving of 5 records, right? So that means that here also it is giving off 5 records. That means that it is connected to database or not. But here, what is our, what is reduced here our work compared to Spring? Tell me guys. Configuration file is reduced. So that means that, where is the spring one? So this file is what we are doing. We are loading of database properties, right? And we need to configure of the component scan, and we need to inject of all these properties inside data source. Internally we are creating of driver manager data source, right or not? So how exactly it is going to which data source? Right now, which data source I am using? Driver manager data source class. Correct or not? Right? In case of Spring, I use of driver manager data source class I have created. I have set all the properties to URL, username, password, and driver class. Correct or not? But in case of Spring, how Spring Boot, how exactly which data source it was used internally? Which data source it was internally? That will come to know. Let me show you that as well. Let me show you that as well. So for every first read this point guys, and then we'll go for that. Okay, now let's, if any point is not understood, let me know guys. Okay, we need to search for or hunt for all the compatible libraries for Spring application. Okay, but we need to search and we need to add, and all the configuration also, data source, JDB template, dispatch servlet, everything, view resolver, we need to configure in the Spring configuration file, and we need to deploy that Spring application in the externally installed server, right or not? That is also one thing. And the problem with Spring component scanning is the problem with Spring component scanning is problem with the Spring component scanning is auto wiring. Component scanning and auto wiring. So internally it will auto wire the dependencies, right? By type, by name, like that, right? So but it is hard to, it is very difficult for the developer to understand the auto configuration in, sorry, in the auto wiring in Spring application. But in Spring Boot, we will easily come to know that which dependency is on which other dependency. That all things we can see by using a sorry, by using actuator feature, that is called actuator feature. This will show all the beans and health metrics, health, okay, and properties, what are all the properties that is depending, every history it will show that in the Spring Boot application, that we'll see soon. Okay, now the advantages with the Spring Boot is okay, the starters. Okay, what is starters guys? It is in the palm file, right? What is the use of starters? Spring Boot starters. Okay, we will call it as a Spring Boot starters. Okay, in the palm file, what we are adding? We are adding up dependencies, right? Yeah, in case of Spring Boot, the name is like Spring Boot starters. We'll call it as a starters. What is the use of starters? For easy maintenance of dependencies. Correct or not? By using the starters, we can manage the dependencies easily or not. Correct? Now, next is auto configuration. Auto configuration means, so now without my JDBC template, without my JDBC template in the Spring Boot application, is my application is connected to database or not? Just simply I have added my credentials in the application.properties file. That's it. So automatically Spring Boot itself internally it is created Spring JDBC template. JDBC template internally depending on data source. Okay, that data source it will create a for some data source, either driver manager data source or basic data source or Tomcat data source or Hickory data source or DBCP. There are a lot of data sources there. Out of all, for which data source the Spring Boot is created object and injected of URL, username, password. That we'll see now. Okay, now where we will see means go to dependencies. Okay, Maven dependencies. For every starter, Spring Boot will give some auto configure jar also. Spring Boot starter auto configure. Spring Boot starter auto configure. Let's go and see Spring Boot actuator. Spring Boot auto configure 2.6.8. There is some jar file Spring Boot auto configure with version. I have used a 2.6.8, right or not? So with that it is created of one jar file, it will download along with that is also downloaded by Spring Boot itself. Okay, to which auto configure Spring Boot is provided auto configuration for which are all the classes that we'll see now. Spring Boot is provided auto configuration for all these classes under this package is the right. Out of that, we need to go for Spring JDBC. We need to go off Spring Boot auto configure JDBC. Now let's go on search of auto configure dot JDBC. Correct or not? This is the JDBC. Now internally now we'll go into data source auto configuration. Spring JDBC template is depending on which class, guys? Data source, right? Yeah. Now the data source Spring Boot is provided auto configuration for data source auto configuration dot class is there. That means that Spring Boot guys provided auto configuration for data source. So now click on data source, that object. Now expand it. Now expand it. Come down. Now come down. Now see this one. Spring Boot is if the Spring Boot data source is available in the class path. If okay, now internally it will load that. Internally, first preference it will give to Hickory data source. Okay, Hickory. There is one data source like a driver manager data source is there, right? In the same way, there is one data source name called Hickory data source. Okay, uh, if this is not there in the class path, then it will search for the Tomcat. It- don't think like Tomcat is a server. Okay, later Apache guys added. Okay, Apache guys added Tomcat to one data source also along with Tomcat server. Okay, now, if this also is not identified, then it will search for DBCP2. If this also is not identified, then Oracle UCP. If this also like that in the sequence, Spring Boot will search for the data source classes. Okay. Now let's go on. See, now at the time of loading, at the time of loading, now positive matches and negative matches. Let's see whether Hickory, right? What is that? Where is the class name? One second. Hickory. Now let's go and search for Hickory. So now go and check in the this is of positive matches. Now let's go and data source. Yeah. Now it is created for which class, guys? Tomcat data source match is found, right or not? Conditional on class. If this class is identified in the class path, okay, then internally Spring Boot will configure that data source. Now it is pointed of Tomcat data source. Okay, if you don't want this, why it is pointed to Tomcat data source means, let me tell you. First one is what is there? Hickory, right? First one is Hickory. Correct or not? Second one is Tomcat. Yeah, why it is means so my requirement I told you like I don't want to go for Hickory CP. I want to go for Tomcat data source. Then in that case, I have excluded. I don't want to go for Hickory CP. I want to go for Tomcat. Now comment this part. Okay, and just comment this also. Now read this one clearly, guys. Now what is found? Where is that? Tomcat is matched, right? Correct or not? It is saying data source configuration dot Tomcat is matched. Now search for Hickory. Is it matched? Didn't match. Correct or not? It is a negative match, right? Now I have modified the jar file now, right? Dependencies is I have this one is commented. Now first priority it will give for which data source? Hickory. Now let's rerun it. See here itself it is saying Hickory pool, right or not? If you want, we'll go and see. Now it is it matched or not matched? Hickory. Now it is giving a first priority. It is giving to I didn't given anything directly. I given a Spring Starter JDBC. By default, it is giving configuration to the Hickory data source. With this data source class, all our what is that? Our driver class, URL, username, properties is there, right? In properties file, those will set inside Hickory data source, and it will get some connection from the data source. Now let's see, the below it is showing. See, it is connected with the data source, right? Registered with the by using of Hickory pool. Clear or not, this guys? Not clear. Here, automatically Spring Boot will reduce our lot of work, guys. That is our main work. Okay. So in any cases, the configuration is the main important. That work is reduced by Spring Boot. Okay. That is our main thing. Now, in case of here also, I'm using of only single dependency. It is downloading of all the required dependencies. Okay, that is one main thing. And the next one is auto configuration. Without my JDBC template configuration, okay, automatically Spring Boot itself internally it is configured of at JDBC template. Internally it is by using of Hickory data source. It is connected to the data connected to database. Okay, right or not? Right, guys? Now, after that, did I deployed my application in any external server? No, right? It automatically deploy. It will internally. It will download the Tomcat itself. But it is a JDBC application, guys, not a web application. In case of Spring Boot Starter Web is there in the class path or in the dependencies, then only it will download that Tomcat server. Okay, but it is not a web application. Correct or not? This is not a web application, guys. That is the reason it is not downloaded Tomcat server. Okay? Tomcat source server. It is not identified in the class path. Match is not found. If it is not matched, then it will not check for those things. Whichever in the class path, for those only all the dependent libraries will be downloaded. Okay? Now let's go to, if you want you can test of other scenarios means you can test it. Okay, create employee count of 9999. Okay, now get employee. Okay, 333 if not there leave it, and with 444 there is some employee is there, then delete it and last fetch it. Okay, and before that I am, after inserting also I'm getting off the detail before deleting. Now let's run it. See, first one is employees created. Which employee? 999, right? Now next is I'm searching for 444. Now get the employee by ID. It is of giving employee, right? The details. The next one is, next one what I am trying. Next go and see fetch all employees, right? Now it is giving of all employees, right? 99 also giving. Next I am deleting employee. How? Delete employee is deleted. Next I am searching for all employees again. This time 444 should not come. See, 4 is not there. So that means that everything is working fine or not? Okay. Guys, I'm telling the people who got the job, Spring Boot is very important, guys. Okay. Now now go for Spring. Let's go to document. Yeah. Now embedded server is also completed. Now Spring Boot starter web. Spring Boot starter web dependency automatically pulls Spring Boot starter Tomcat server also, which starts Tomcat as a embedded server. Tomcat as a embedded server. So we no need to deploy. We no need to deploy our application on any external installed server. We no need to deploy our application directly. Spring Boot itself, it will download one server and then it will deploy inside that. Okay. Next, so actuator. What is the purpose of actuator? Means the actuators, it will check for which bean is depending on which other bean. Okay, and what is the environment properties that we have configured in our application. Okay, and what is the memory usage? What is the health check? Whether health is good or not. All that metrics will be done by actuator framework. It means actuator, there is one more dependency like Spring Boot starter web. There is one more dependency, Spring Boot starter actuator, that will check all these properties. Single dependency will take care of all these things that we'll see now. Okay. Now I'm using of one web application. Okay. Some any web application I am creating one. Go to, I've created one student management application. Okay, what is there inside this one? Let's go and see. Anything that is new here? Just this is generated class, guys. Okay, all magic will be done by at Spring Boot application, guys. At Spring Boot application will do, it is a combination of three annotations. It is a combination of three annotations. Let's go and see. See, one is Spring Boot configuration. In case of Spring, in case of Spring, whichever the classes is annotated with that configuration, those classes are configuration class or not, right? In case of Spring, if you are configuring our app config, which annotation we have used? At configuration, right? Then we will treat that this is a configuration file, right? So in case of Spring Boot, it is under Spring Boot application itself came. So internally this is extending of at configuration, at configuration, right or not? This configuration is already added by at Spring Boot annotation is extended or not, right? At Spring Boot configuration annotation is extended by using at configuration. So that is a child of that or not? So internally, along with that, at the component scan, even that also there in case of Spring Boot, Spring, right? Even this annotation is also part of Spring Boot application annotation. Okay, and along with that, whatever the auto configuration is there, right? Auto configuration. So like employee DO is depending on the JDBC template. JDBC template is internally depending on data source, right? That auto configuration will be enabled by using of this annotation. Okay, at enable auto configuration, these three annotations are internally annotated by using of one annotation that is called by using one annotation, this internally it contains of how many annotations, guys? One is at Spring Boot configuration for configuration files for okay for configuring, and one more is component scan is also there. The next one is enable auto configuration. Enable auto configuration means our JDB. Yes. So we no need to do the Spring Boot itself. It will auto configure those dependencies. Whichever is if JDBC template is depending on data source means automatically JDB Spring Boot itself will configure them. We don't need to do that. That's what that magic will be done by using of this annotation. Okay, is it clear right now? So before we are using of all these annotations, later they included all these annotations in one annotations that is called at Spring Boot application annotation. Okay, this will do all magic at a Spring Boot application. Okay, now next. If you want to run off internally, it is having lot of dependencies. Okay, if you want to have that, 1 second. Thinking of now, let's leave it. No issue. And next what I'm doing. Let me on next controller. Next controller, what I'm doing is so I have annotated a class with at controller. Even you can use a at rest controller for restful web services. Okay, if you want to develop of any MVC application by using Spring Boot, also we can develop that. Okay, so I have annotated class with at controller. Is this annotation is new or you or we know already? Do we know this annotation already or not, guys? Already we know, right? This at auto wire already we know, right? Now let's there are some annotations. Okay, now at get mapping is if you are using of get. Okay, post mapping means at request method of method equal post means for that specialized annotation they have given by that guy Spring guys is for getting get mapping, for post mapping. See, post mapping, if it is a there is one more put is there. Okay, for that directly we can use of post mapping also, no issue. Okay, let's control is done. This is of student. I have annotated with actually if you are using of this one, then we need to do a lot of configuration, right? Hibernate template and for creating of auto DDL to auto, all those things, correct or not, in the Spring configuration file, right? Many things we need to do. But in this case, nothing, I will not do anything. Just in the application that properties, this already we know, correct or not? This four already we know. Did you see anywhere this value, the names? Hibernate DDL dot auto and Hibernate dialect. Did you observe anywhere? Already we know, right? Yes, those properties just we are adding inside up. Yes. Now, then in that case, just we are adding these properties, right or not? Automatically, Spring Boot itself will do the configuration internally. Just if I'm adding these three things internally, it will. If the table is not there, automatically it will create. If the table is already there, it won't. If that it won't create it, right? This is for displaying of queries. This is for Oracle dialect to connect with to generate the query according to the Oracle database. This is the dialect. Okay, and this is used for actuator. How many beans are depending on with each other, how many beans it is created, what are the properties that we are used inside this application, what are the health status, all the things we can check by using of this we need to add to enable of that actuator endpoints. We need to enable this endpoint management data. This is we are not added. This endpoints will be created by Spring Boot guys. Okay, so for that we are enabling that by using this property. Now we'll see that also soon. Now next is what I am doing. Did I do anything here? This is the DAO guys. Let's say service class. Service class is depending on which class. Service is depending on DAO, right or not? Correct? Any service class will be depending on DAO class, guys. Let me. The flow is, guys, anywhere. Remember, anywhere. Sorry, Control Z. Okay. Now, this is assume that this is a browser. Okay, or client. Okay. Whenever any request is coming, it will come to first controller. Okay, dispatch servlet. Internal will forward to our controller class. Next is service layer. Next is DAO layer. DAO or repository. Repository layer. DAO layer or repository layer. What is this? This is database. Database. Now flow is yeah. Any request first will come to from any browser it will come to controller class. Okay. Controller it will come to service layer. Service layer it will come to DAO layer. DAO layer it will interact with the database. Right or not? Now once the database interacted, now database will return data back to what? To repository layer. Repository layer it will return the response back to service layer. No, no. Database will return that data to first to DAO layer or repository layer. Okay. Again, that data will be returned back to service layer. From where we are calling service layer, so DAO layer from service layer, right? So the DAO will return that data back to service layer. Again, service layer where the data will return back to controller. Controller will return back the data to client. Not clear or not? Client to controller, controller to service layer to DAO, DAO to database. Yes, from again database to it will return data to repository layer. Repository layer will return the data to service layer. Service layer it will return back to controller. Controller will return that back to client. This is the flow, right? Now here also, now from from controller class, any controller is depending on service layer. So compulsory we need to add that auto wire or not dependency. Correct? Now again now service layer is depending on which one? Yes, now service layer is depending on DAO repository. Okay, repository name is we will use in case of JPA Java Persistent API. Okay, if you are using of Hibernate, compulsory we need to write DAO logic or not. In the DAO layer, we need to write some logic. We need to write to get the data from database. If we are using repositories, okay, JPA, then we don't need to write any code inside repository or DAO layer. Okay, how exactly we can do this one means let's say for example if you are writing one entity class, sorry, if you are writing one entity class, guys, okay, then for this class to get the data from the database from this table or from this entity class, there compulsory there is some table, right? What is the table for this entity? What is the table for this entity? Student underscore, no, this is the entity class. The table name is underscore m is the table name in the database, correct or not? Now if I want to get the data from by using student underscore m table, okay, which entity we need to use? Student entity, correct, in the Java class. Now, with this student entity class, we will create one interface class that will extend of that will implement it will extend of one class, then one interface that is of JPA repository or code repository. Now let me show you that. I have not written anything. I have created one simple one interface. Right or not? Public interface student repository. It is extending of which class? It is extending of JPA repository. All methods there are. It is taking of two parameters. Two parameters. One is the POSO class name or entity class name. The second parameter is primary key of this entity class. Primary key of entity class. Okay. Let's say if I'm created of class employee. Okay. So let me write off what the first annotation at entity, right? Next at table, name of the table, right? Give of emp boot, okay, I'm giving some name. Now give of some private id, okay? So what is the annotation that we need to use here at and what is that generated value equal to strategy we need to use of generation type dot auto for automatically generating that, right? Now, yeah, if column is not there, by default it will use of this EID. Just assume employee ID. Okay, use this one. Now next, give up some more one or two string name properties. I will not do so. It will create by. I am not giving any column name means this is the name of the column in the database also in this table. Okay, or e name. Okay, e name. Name. Next, private into salary something some anything, okay. Now give off setters and getters, which is df. Do we have this table in the database? Just now we created, right or not? Now, yeah. Now, so if you want to, if you are using repository class means, then by using Hibernate means we need to write queries, Hibernate query or criteria, something we need to use, correct or not? But if you are using of JPA means inside the repository layer, control interface, just search for interface, create one interface. Name is just give off employee repository. Repository, click on finish. It is created on interface, right? Now extend this, extends JPA repository. See, just JPA extend repository. It is giving up two values. One is T and one is ID, right? T means entity. T means entity, employee, right? Entity. The second parameter is what is the primary key type? What is the, what is the type? This one int. Type is int. Okay, that int type we need to give here integer. We need to give of integer. That's it. Internally, if you want to get any data from employee table, just we need to create of object for this class, auto configure this class. It will get all the data. Okay, so there is some methods inside a JPA repository. So if you want to save method is there. Okay, save all, if multiple is there, save all is there. See, save method. If you want to find by, if you want to get by using ID, there is a method called find by ID. Find by IDs, find all, there are a lot of methods is there. Or else if you go for code repository. Cu of code repository. Cu or code repository. Use of GPA, right? Okay, maybe it is of we are not added of the dependency for code repository or only for JPA is added. Okay. Now it contains of lot of methods for that. Okay. Find all, save, okay, save all, like that there are many methods is there to get the data, get one, get by id, okay, like that methods are available inside this class to get the data. This is written by jpa guys, we don't need to write, only we need to use of those methods. In collections we are using a lot of methods, right or not? Who return? Java people return. In this case also we should know which method is require, which method is suitable for our requirement. That is our duty. Okay. Now in the same way we have created a student repository, that's it. Okay. Now if you want to get any data from the student table, then we need to automate this dependency in the service layer. That's what we are added here, or else this one make it at auto wire. Okay, add of shutter dependency. Okay, shutter method. So shift shutter methods, shutter methods. Okay, now let's go. Next is there's a DAO. DAO will interact internally. Sorry, repository internally it will interact with the database. Okay, that is not our. Yes. Now let's try. Then clean. So as install. What is the class? Which class we need to run, guys? Student management application class we need to run. Okay, it's just a normal main method class, core Java class. Core Java class is the right with main method. Just we need to run it. Just it is doing off all the validation interview. It is checking, guys. See, do you have existing emp underscore boot table? No, right? So Hibernate is created. On what basis it is created, guys? What we have added for that? In application.properties, just simply I have added this one. Any other things I have added? No other configuration I have done. Correct or not? Internally, it will take care of all those things. That means that compared to Spring Boot is better or not? Right? Yeah. Now let's run the application. It is a web application, guys. Server is still not started. It's taking a lot of time. Exposing of 13 endpoints by slash path. Okay, we'll see that later. Now Tomcat is started, right? 8080 port. Now let's go to http localhost 80 slash go to our controller class. We'll take up one endpoint. We'll take one endpoint students. Okay, and we'll search with this what data it will. So it is returning to what? It is taking up returning students, right? String. But it is a Spring MVC application, guys. How we are saying that it is MVC application? It is annotated with at controller. It is a model and view object, guys. Okay, it is a JSP name. Now go to here class students. What is coming? Is it is opened some JSP. It is opened. Sorry, not this. Close this one. It is opened some JSP. Let's search for is there any file is there not. See students.html, right? So there are some lot of code is there. It is of bootstrap related, guys. For look and feel bootstrap related dependencies. For header all those things, this is for navigation bar. Okay, this is for getting of this navigation bar. Okay, and if you want of list of students, this is of some HTML code, guys, for giving of good look and feel. Just I have downloaded from bootstrap. Okay, now but it is not our responsible to write off bootstrap and angular react all those things. For our look and feel we have added that. Okay, guys, one thing is I'm telling hundreds of projects is available in the Google. Okay, our work is only how to reuse them. Okay, if you know that, then we can do anything. Okay, now if you want to by default only one record is there in the database. Now let's add one more. Okay, Hmm, Suresh at Kumar at gmail.com. Gmail, yeah, gmail.com. Let's click on add. Is it created or not? So now what is happening when I am clicking on add button? When I'm clicking on add button, what is happening? Now let's go and see. On click on submit. On click on submit, it is going to the action is which action, guys? Students. Correct or not? Action is students. What is the type is? Method type is post method. Right? Now go to controller class, student controller class. Now same students is get is there. Okay, now same student with the post, whichever it is going for this method this time, right? Why it will go to this method? It is a method type is post. Okay, that is the reason this method will call of students. Correct. Now it is of saving students. I told you model attribute will get the data from client to controller class, right or not? Guide, do you remember that the model attribute will get the data from the JSP to or from the client to controller class, right? So in this case, we are using of model attribute. See, okay. Whenever we are displaying the form itself, that time create new means. So that time I'm using a model attribute of add of student. I'm giving model attribute, right? So with the same attribute, while saving, I'm getting the data in this object. Whatever that is there in the student, all the data will come through model attribute. Okay. Now student service is interacting with sorry, controller is interacting with student service service layer, and student service layer is interacting with student repository layer. We don't have any method here, right or not? But it is of which method? Which means it is saving or not? It is going to somewhere, going to code repository for saving of that entity. Okay, whichever we are passing here student entity directly by using this repository class, already predefined methods are available in the code repository. Predefined methods are available in the code repository. Internally, it is of lot of classes is there, lot of methods is there. Okay, so by using those methods, just we are using of those existing methods to save the entity. Just save of entity means it will save that. Okay, and go back to controller class. After saving that, after saving, to where I'm redirecting again, guys, to where I'm redirecting, redirect to students, right? Then again it will go to by default get mapping. Okay, it will go to get, it is going to get of all the students, right or not? It is getting all the students from the student service, and there is a method called in the repository find all. Okay, find all for each, for which table it will get, find all students, it is of related to student repository, correct or not? Student repository class is having of relation with which table, which entity, student entity. That's where this will come into, that's where the relation will come here. Okay, this object contains of all the methods of student repository. The student repository internally it is having dependency with, for our entity classes we have given student and with primary key. Okay, now next, so that's where it will give off student controller class, it will return all the data, and again it will go to same JSP, all the JSP. Go back, click on this, again it will come to the same JSP. Okay, if you're adding again, click on submit, so it is going to save the database and it is redirecting to students endpoint. Okay, get endpoint, from there it is calling to database and it is getting up all the data which is saved in the database and it is returning back. Okay, now if you are update of anything, okay, if you want to update of anything, now go to students HTML. Okay, now come down, so where is that? Yeah, here what is the endpoint I'm using, slash student slash edit id, right? So if you want to edit anything, compulsory we should know like the employee id of this guys, student id or employee id, correct or not? The primary key with which primary key it is saved in the database, correct or not? That id will get the data, see, it will come and it is already displayed. If you want to modify that, Suresh and submit, Suresh k, submit it. Is it submitted or not? Data everything. All these things will be based on ID only. Either update or delete. These two must be based on ID. Student ID. These two. If you want to delete also based on student ID. If you want to update and edit and also based on student ID only, we can use it. Okay. To develop the UI by using uh, the HTML page or anything, there is one dependency that is called Spring Boot time leaf. Spring Boot time leaf dependency. We need to add it. Let me show you that. Spring Boot time leaf is we need to add. That is called. So you come down. Yeah, Spring Boot starter time leaf. Okay, this is for writing of any HTML code to designing. Okay, then we need to use a Spring Boot time leaf. Okay, dependency. But mostly we will write it off RESTful APIs only, guys. Okay, but if you want, you can learn on your own. The UI means. Now next. Now next is what is that means, if you want to delete up, let's say delete it. Based on that ID it is deleted and same again the same page is reloading. That's what we are writing inside in the controller class. Student controller class. If you want to edit, this is the one edit page is displaying. Okay, If you want update, after updating again it is ending back to redirecting to students page. Okay. And if you want to delete, after deleting also we are deleting by using of, there is a method in the repository, delete method, delete by id. Okay. For everything they have created a separate method, guys, repository jpa, guys. Okay. Now inside this, so now our control class is depending on student service, student is depending on repository layer, right? Now how to see that dependencies being dependencies, okay. For that we need to add up one dependency that is called actuator. That actuator, that is that I've seen, yeah, Spring Boot actuator. How to see that all the dependencies means, if you want of any 8080 slash actuator slash beans, click on that. See, it is having of a lot of, let me take it this, yeah. Our student controller is not, I think these are actuator. Let me, first 8080 plus actuator plus pins. Yeah, yes, pins are coming. Okay, we need to use of on it. Let's see why it is coming like this. For the actual let's leave it. So we got off all these things. Let's see, and now we will search for control A, control V. Now search for our class Spring Boot. Sorry, student controller class. Student controller class. Somewhere it will be depending on some other class. Okay. Now let's go and see student application, student controller class. So it is depending on some other class. Now we will see that. Somewhere it will be depending on some sources. Count, let me count it. How many times? Three times. Java training student controller dependencies. Yeah, see this, guys. Yeah. So student controller class is depending on dependencies is student service IMPL. Okay. Now if you are going for, sorry, student controller is depending on some other class, right? Student service IMPL class, right? Student service that only, right? That is implementation class. That means this is the interface, right? The actual implementation is, where is it available? It is of in implementation class, right? Student service IMPL class. Correct or not? If not, if doubt is there. No, this is the interface mod, just only. It contains, but actual implementation where we have done in the IMPL class, right? Actual this calls will be happen to this one only, right? Or else, if you want, if you are removing this, then okay, then we need to remove all these things. Get off that. Let's remove it. Remove it. Remove it. Remove. Remove. Now, okay. For your people, now we'll see that. Okay. That is the actual implementation class. No, sorry, I think the dependency got missed. Student controller is we need to use of IMPL. We have to remove the relation between them, right? Okay. Yeah. This- These are all modifications that we need to do, guys. If you are mod touching anything, okay, that we should know. And if you want, I can delete up that also, but this time it should show off actual dependency. It is with the student service IMPL only. Okay, not with student service is a interface. That interface we are implemented in the IMPL class. The actual dependency is IMPL class only. Okay, now student services again say run it, and then meanwhile we will go for that. Sorry, I think this I did a mistake. Yeah, Tomcat is started now. Click here. It will show off all the dependencies. Now let's see. Remove this and paste it. Okay. Now see, this is our class student controller. Okay. Now STU student controller. See, so student controller is depending on the dependency is student service IMPL. Okay. Now if you are searching for student service IMPL, okay, STUDE student service IMPL. Okay, it is depending on which class, guys. Student service is depending on student repository, right? Now let's try for student service repository also. Student service repository is depending on a lot again. Internally it will do of a lot of configuration. It will do that, enable JPA repositories and student, that will do internal things. It is a none of our headache. Okay, but internally it will do all the configurations, that is everything connects everything, that will do by Spring Boot. Okay, we don't need to do anything. Okay, boot itself will take care of that. This is where we can identify all the beans, which bean is depending on other, which other bean, all those things that we can see here. Okay, if you want to see all the what are the properties of environment properties. Okay, now see all these properties, we can see there are many properties is there. Okay, that we don't have that, but we want of by default server is started on which port? 8080, right? If you want to change that, then what we can do, we can change our form. Go to application.properties file. Now there is a property called server dot port. Server dot port, there is one property is there. Okay, 9090 if I am keeping. Okay, now this time server will start by using a port 9090. If you are trying for the application by using 8080, it will not work. Now let's see. Let's wait. Still, it is not started. Yeah, see, already started. The server port is what is the guys? I've given 9090 before 8080, right? Now, now let's wait and see. Now Tomcat is started on 9090 port. Now, if you are trying with the same, it will not work. We have changed the port, right? Now change it to 9090. Now try it. See, so that configuration, all flexibility is there by using Springboot. Okay, everything we can do in the Spring application.properties file. Now, let's say like that, we have all many properties is there. Okay, out of our properties, let's see, we are using of Oracle, right? Now let's see JDK version and Spring dot data source dot all our details. Is it available or not? See, where we are getting these details through URL patterns through some other outside, right? Correct or not? This is of to get all the to check the health check status. Okay, so let's say suppose the code is deployed in the production. We can't see the details of production, right? So that case, what we can use of this endpoint to get all the what is the configured properties in our application, that we can get all these details and we can verify what are the details that we did any mistake, that we can verify easily. Is it clear or not? Right? Instead of going for the code, it is best, right? Correct or not? URL username, what is the username, password that we have configured. See, password is also it is giving star. That means secure or not, right? This is the properties which we have configured in our application. Correct or not? In actual configuration. The rest of the things is internally that is used by Spring Boot. Okay. What we will do, whatever that is required for us, we will configure. Rest of the things, that is whatever required with Spring Boot, that itself it will configure, right? Someone has to configure it, configure or not. So whatever that is required for us, that we are configured in the application.properties file. There are some other things that is required for the Spring Boot, that is configured by Spring Boot itself, right or not? Correct. Now let's rerun. Now this time it will give us what happened, env not it should give of 9090. What happened? Who is not starting? Started, right? Maybe something is okay. No issue. But the actual thing is we need to add up. One is activator dependency in the pom.xml file, and for that all the dependencies will be downloaded by, if any beans is there, all those health check, everything we can verify by using of yeah, here is we need to use of 9090, right? And that is the reason it is not giving beans. Now close it. See, all beans, this time it will give. Okay, now environment properties env it will give of this time 9090 port. Okay, so based on the configuration we can get the all these metrics. Okay, let me check what is the health, HEALTH, what is the state of my application health, whether it is up or not. What is the status is showing as up or not, right? Is that it is running. Okay, so like that we can verify of a lot inside Spring Boot. Is it at least somewhat clear or not, guys? Rest of things we can learn. At least some minimum basic things is required. Okay, so by using Spring Boot, the advantage is four things. Remember, guys. One is Spring Boot starters. Okay, and auto configuration. Third one is embedded server. The fourth one is actuator. These four is the main advantages of Spring Boot. See, Spring Boot increases the speed of development because of starters and auto configuration. Correct or not? Right? These both are increasing our speed or not? Development speed. We don't need to search for the compatible libraries. We don't need to add configuration. Both is reducing and it is saving a lot of work for the developer. Right or not? The developer will work only on the business logic. Correct? And the one of the great outcome of Spring Boot is almost eliminates the need of traditional XML configuration. Did you use anywhere XML? Right? That is not that means that it is good or not Spring Boot. And Spring Boot, I am giving up clearly everything of some notes also for that Spring Boot starters. So without Spring Boot, we need to configure all the dependencies required in the pom.xml file, right? So with Spring Boot starter, aggregate the common grouping of dependencies into a single starter dependency. That correct or not this word? Spring Boot starter, what it is doing? It is aggregating of all the required common libraries, okay, into a single Spring Boot starter dependency. That is, let's say if you are using of JDBs means whatever that is required for the as a developer, whichever the libraries that you need, all that libraries will be downloaded by Spring Boot itself. Okay. So internal it contains of a lot of what since I told you, I shown you also there is somewhere. See, lot of things will be there. So based on the version which you are giving in the Spring Boot, appropriate versions will be downloaded. That's what the magic of Spring Boot. Okay. Next, all Spring Boot starter parent. Okay, this is common for all applications anywhere. Any dependency will be depending on Spring Boot starter. So internally that will be depending on Spring Boot dependencies. See, this is internally depending on Spring Boot starter parent. Spring Boot starter parent internally depending on Spring Boot dependencies that we have seen, right? So this is of Spring Boot dependency only, right? See, Spring Boot dependencies. Where it is there? Go back, go back, go back, go back. Now parent. Search for parent. Inside this parent, come down. Go to 2.2.7. Go to POM. So POM is depending on, see, Spring Boot starter parent is depending on which parent again? Which artifactory? Spring Boot dependency. Okay, with that compulsory it may be one more is there. Okay, that is depending on that. So inside that all the compatible libraries will be available. Is it clear, guys? We don't have any parent for this, correct or not? Spring Boot starter doesn't have any parent. This is the final one. So inside this, from this actual, all the dependent versions will be compatible versions will be downloaded. Okay, if you are changing 2.5.5 or something, whatever. So according to that version, it will download the dependent compatible versions. Okay. Now next. So if we are using of each place version, okay, let's say this is one dependency, right? So even here also I can use version, okay, but it will give off some warning. It is not required actually, right? It is giving some warning, correct or not? So all this is depending on which one parent, correct or not? All the dependencies under dependencies, whatever dependencies is there, all are depending on parent, right? So if I am depending that version, if I am adding version of in the parent itself, then in the child we don't need to add anywhere. Okay, for all of them the same versions 2.7, 2.7.7 will be applicable. Okay, that's what I have given here. 7.7. Okay. auto configuration. So in case of auto configuration, so I told you one class, right? Now let's wait. Go to Maven dependency, Spring Boot, auto configure. For which all classes Spring Boot has provided auto configuration, that we can see by using by using, one second guys, Spring Boot auto configure. Yes, this one. Go to Meta NF. Go to Meta NF. Go to Spring Factories. Inside this, it will show for which are all classes Spring Boot is provided auto configuration. Okay, like that it will show you every dependency whichever it is having. It will show some auto configuration classes. Okay, to which it is depending on that. Yeah, I show you this also. Okay, JDBC template. Next, Hickory, data, Tomcat, and basic data source. Okay, if you don't want of Hickory, then we need to add this exclusion, and we need to add of whichever other dependency one. We need to add this one. Then it will not use of Hickory data source. It will use of Tomcat data source instead of that. Okay. Now, and one more thing, if you don't want of application.ml, then we can application.properties file. We can use of application.yaml file also. Okay, even both we can use it. There is some other project I have done. Yeah. So this is of ML file, right? Sorry, application.properties file. So this is of ML file. It will change the structure. That's it. So in case of Spring application.properties file, Spring.data source is common for all, right? Four properties. But in case of ML, it will structure the data. Spring colon. Next to below next line, data source colon, username, password, driver class, URL, username, password. Like this, it will remove of that duplicate strings in the keys. Okay, it will give in some structured format, but both are legal. You can use of application.properties file or application.ml file. Both is legal. Okay. Even this also I have given at Spring Boot application internally contains of at Spring Boot configuration, at component scan, and at enable auto configuration. Right or not, guys? I showed you this one. Internally it contains of these three annotations. Right? Not there? Not remember? Let me go to the, yeah, see this internal it contains of all, correct or not? Three is there. Okay. Now container means if you are using the starter web, internally it will download of Tomcat server also. Okay. Actuators means that which we have seen. This is the dependency that we need to add in the pom.xml file. Then only we can see of the health and beans and the environment variables, everything. Okay. Without this dependency, we can't check all those things, health checks. Okay. Yeah, these are the things that we have seen. Is it okay, guys? I'll tell you one more project. Okay, I'll tell you one more project with some other project also for giving up more details again, and I'll give off how to develop microservices using Spring Boot. How to develop microservices. So I'll say one more time Spring Boot tomorrow. Okay, I'll repeat it. Maybe one time if you not understood, we can explain it. Repeat tomorrow also. Is it okay, guys? Today's class. Yeah. But guys, remember I'll repeat it tomorrow. But these four are very important, guys. Okay. Everything is on these four only. Okay. If you understood this, then you can play around it in Spring Boot. Okay. And tomorrow I'll explain JPA. Tomorrow I'll explain Spring Boot JPA. I'll give up some explanation about Spring Boot data JPA. Okay, Spring Data JPA. Okay, and later we'll go for microservices. For that, four microservices I'm creating. Okay, With that, how we can communicate with each other, all those things that we'll see one application through. Okay, guys, maybe we'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you.